everybody, welcome to my channel, A Magical Maiden. So I was going to upload older videos, a playlist, but I had some problems with my older videos that for some reason they went to M4B, and when I tried to change them, it would take over an hour to put it back to MP4 because I was going to condense them, put them in my editor, but my editor didn't recognize MP4s, only MPVs, they only recognize MP4s, and I had to put it in Handbrake, which would take over an hour. Anyway, I'm like, I don't have time for this, another day, maybe, another time. I didn't really want to mess with it. So I didn't, and I didn't bother. So what happened was, I had to close the window, it's really close, like 40 something out there, and I'm in southern Alabama, so, okay. So I didn't really want to mess with all that, so I'm going to retell some of the stories. Now, some of you might remember the story, some of you don't. Okay, so I will only tell one of the stories, and then maybe tomorrow another story, and whatever. So one of the stories are when, let's see, I lived in Florida. This was back in the 90s, and I lived in South Florida, and I was married to my ex-husband. Okay, now we had moved from New York to Florida, and his parents were dead, and his mother died and left us their mobile home. And we figured we'd stay in there for about 2-3 years, and then we'd go get a house. So we moved there, this way we could save money. We had money, so we went there to establish ourselves in job, because you have to have some kind of job and credit to get a house. So we moved there anyway. There was this couple that lived down the block, and they had a motorcycle. Now my ex and myself had motorcycles. I had my own, he had his, they were choppers, they were Harleys. And he saw this guy riding. Anyway, he met up with him, and he's like, oh, you should come meet my wife. I guess he needed a part for the motorcycle, and he brought him over, introduced me to him, and he's like, yeah, him and his girlfriend lived down the block. So eventually we met them, and she was really nice, and we would hang out. Now, to give you an idea of what he was like, he was kind of quirky. He was British, he was from England, and he was this skinny guy with glasses and curly hair, and he was a nice guy, but he was kind of quirky, kind of weird, but Now, his girlfriend was really nice, but here's the thing. He liked older women in their 60s, and probably because he wanted a sugar mama, because he always seemed to go for older women that had a good credit and a good paying job. And Birdie has to be good, okay? So he was like 32, and she was like 58 at the time, or something like that. Yeah, because by the time they got married, he was like 30, he was like 34, and she was 60. And she was okay looking. She wasn't, she was kind of plain, but she had glassware, but she wasn't bad looking. And she was really nice, and I liked her a lot. But he was really nice and everything, but he was a quirky kind of guy. Like, for instance, when we moved out of the mobile home, and he had a mobile home, when we all moved out, he got a house first. And his house was in a not so great area, and a really older house that needed a lot of work, and it was a small house. When we got ours, because we had more money, we got it it was a newer house in a better area, better neighborhood, and it was nicer and bigger. And so he seemed to be kind of jealous, and I don't know, I feel like he seemed irritated that we got a better house, so he would pick out the things that were wrong with it and be like, oh, this is look at that. And it was like, we just moved in, we have things to do to the house, So then when we, a few years later, we got a pool put in, and we got a bigger screened-in patio. We refinanced, got a loan, and had to do all that. And he had a big yard, but he didn't have a screen and patio. So what he did was you can tell he didn't like that. So he went out and built, like when we invited them over for dinner to enjoy the new pool and everything, he kind of was quiet. We had a hot tub, and I got the hot tub for my back. I'm trying to do the story without interruptions from my cat. Okay, so you can tell he was jealous because I had a hot tub, we had a built-in pool, we had this big screened-in patio, and he was just sitting there kind of quiet and kind of looking. And then eventually, all of a sudden, he builds a little screened-in patio. It was cute because he did carpentry work, and it wasn't bad. It was not a bad little cute one, but it was still homemade. And he got an old hot tub and had to repair and put jets. It's an old used one that had no jets, nothing. He was going to do that, but it sat there for like probably all eternity, and he never fixed it. He couldn't afford a pool. He could probably get an above ground, but he couldn't afford that, so he didn't have that. So most of the time I would invite them over, but after that he didn't seem to want to come over because he didn't have anything. But then eventually what happened was one time, because we used to like hang out, we were at their wedding, we would go out, you know, to dinner over their house, they would come out to dinner over our house, we spent New Year's Eve together. All seemed normal, but then he started getting weird. Like he was spending a lot of money on credit cards, and of course it was on her credit. Okay, I don't know if he was in this country legally. I know his father was here legally and had a business, and he used to work with his father with cabinetry. Anyway, long story short, I'm just trying to give you an idea of what he was like. So like I said, he was a little quirky. For instance, one day we invited them over for dinner. You know, go in the hot tub, swim in the pool. It was a nice day. Come over for dinner. So they come over and they bring this 14-year-old kid with them. It's not their kid. It was like a neighbor kid. First of all, I invited them. It's for adults, you know. I had alcohol there, and I didn't expect them to bring a 14-year-old kid that I don't even know. They didn't even tell me. Who would just invite somebody and bring them along when you're invited, like if you were invited to dinner somewhere? So I was kind of taken back by that. Then when I offered them a drink, they're like, no, we're born again. So, okay. So now all of a sudden they're wearing these big gold crosses, and suddenly they all belong to a church and they're born again Christians. So I was like, when did this happen? And the funny thing was, for a joke, because we used to all joke, I made this pasta that was penises and boobs. They were shaped like that. And they told me they're born again Christians and they bring this 14-year-old, and that's the pasta dinner I have for them. I wasn't going to tell them, it was just a joke, you know, to see if they noticed while they were eating the pasta, because we all had a good sense of humor and everything. But now I'm like, well, you're probably not going to like the dinner I made. So, but they laughed, but you can tell they were very different. And she goes along with whatever he's into. So then, that was kind of weird. Then the next thing he suddenly was into was massage therapy, to become a masseuse. And he was forcing his wife to do that too. She had a regular job, so now she had to work a regular job and do that. But she thought she had this greatest catch because she had a young guy that had a British accent, and you know, I don't know, I guess people get turned on by that. I want a sane person, okay? And she did whatever he wanted, and I was kind of like, wake up already, you know? And so now he made her do that. The poor girl was tired, working her regular job and coming home to that, and he was like spending all her money, ruining her credit, and now he wanted to be a masseuse, so he goes to masseuse school, makes her go to masseuse school, makes her pay for all this, and now he's into masseuse. Then he starts to take Viagra. He's a 34-year-old guy. He didn't even need Viagra. He just wanted to try it. So now he's become a big horn dog who can't stop wanting. Okay, so this is segueing. So I thought that was weird. And then his personality started changing. and he just became weird. Like we used to like go on I had a boat, and he used to come on the boat. We used to hang out, and he never like seemed pervy or checking me out or anything. I mean, I was in a bathing suit, for God's sake. He never did that. All of a sudden one day, like, I had invited them both over, and he kept checking my boobs out, and then like if I had to bend down to the cooler, I felt like he was watching me, and I caught him just checking out my butt and everything, and I was like, ew, I'm getting creeped out. Plus, what if his wife notices that he's doing this? So, I pulled my then husband, now ex-husband, aside, and I go, do you notice he's checking me out? What the hell's going on here? He's like, I noticed that. If he doesn't cut it out, I'm going to clock him on. So I felt very awkward around him. And then she was telling me how she hated doing the massage because some of these guys think they're going to get a happy ending, and they're kind of pervy. And she's like, they turn around and they're, hello. And she'd be like, ugh, and she didn't want to do it. And he was making her do that. And she was tired because she had a regular job. And I felt bad for him. Like, why are you putting up with this? The guy's ruining her credit. And she's like, well, I'm 60 years old. He's 30. What am I going to do? And I was just like, this is strange. Anyway, fast forward, because I want this to be a long one. So he used to, like I said, do carpentry, and he knew that my ex was doing work on the house and we needed some wood. So one day he brought some wood over. He was supposed to come on the weekend when my ex was home. But he came in the afternoon, like around 2, when he knew he'd be working on a weekday. So he's like, I'm coming over to drop some wood over. I'm like, okay, just put it in the garage. I opened the garage. I was like, go ahead. Then he came over and said, oh, I have a part for the motorcycle. It was the next day, and it was always during the weekday. And I was like, he kept trying to find reasons to come over. So one day he comes over, and I'm like, what is he doing here now? It was like maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I just hung up with my ex, and he said he'd be home probably earlier today, because he'd come home anytime between 4 and 6, and he was going to come home around 4. So I was like, okay. Because I had to know what time to make dinner and whether we would go out to dinner or what. So I'm waiting. So I was just going to do a few things, and then I was going to start dinner. When I get a knock at the door, and it's him. And I'm like, well, what do you want? And his name was Dave. And I was like, what do you want, Dave? And he's like, oh, I have something for you. And I'm like, what? And he's like, some old rickety lounge chair that he went garbage. He's like, I found this in the garbage. I figured you can use an extra lounge chair. Now, we had nice lounge chairs out in the backyard because we just got our built-in pool, just got our patio extended and everything. And I was like, I don't want this rickety piece of crap that you picked out of the garbage. But I'm like, whatever, okay. And I'm like, why does he keep coming here every day? It was kind of getting on my nerves. So then I'm like, okay, let me just get out of the computer. So he follows me in my computer room, and he starts talking, and he's like, oh, what are you doing? I go, oh, I'm talking to a friend on chat. And then he's like, oh, I'm not allowed to be on the computer. We don't even have internet. And I go, why? And he's like, oh, I can't even have magazines or anything with girls on it because his wife was really jealous. And I was like, okay, I thought that was weird. Like, what was he doing that she won't allow this? You gotta remember, this was the 90s. Not everybody was getting the internet, okay? A lot of people did have the internet by now, but it wasn't big. So he was just sitting with me, and then he started telling me that he's picking up hookers. I'm like, why are you telling me this crap? Why? That he's like, first of all, he's like, yeah, and I was afraid that I got a bladder infection from her. And I'm like, why are you picking up hookers? Okay. So then he tells the story how he met some 50-year-old woman, and he was having sex with her in his Jaguar on the steering wheel, and he was being explicit. And I'm like, I don't want to hear this. I'm friends with your wife and you're cheating on her, and now you're telling me what you're doing. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, but do I tell her? Because she's the type of, even if you told her, she would take his side. you know, and be mad at you for telling her the truth. Because I've had some friends where I knew they were doing that, and I told them, and instead they made excuses for him, and then they were mad at me. So, go figure. And then they chose theirs to stay with their boyfriends and ditch me as a friend when I was a good friend that told them. So what happened was, I don't want to lose track. Okay, so I thought this was all weird conversation. So I tried to change the conversation to something normal. So then he asked me, do I ever cheat? Do I ever consider cheating? I'm like, I don't think any of this is your business. He goes, well, I know you're not really happy being married, which was true. I wasn't happy with my ex. And, but I stayed for a while until I could financially get myself out of that situation, which I did, and now I have a wonderful husband that makes me very happy. But he started to say this, and I was just like, okay, why are you bringing this up? So anyway, he says he has to go. I'm like, my husband's coming home soon. He should be home any minute. He told me that he was going to come home early. And he's like, oh, okay. I'm like, yeah, because I got to start dinner. So I thought he'd go and leave, but he's like, I have to go to the bathroom. I'm like, okay. So now I had two bathrooms. One was in the hallway, which was mine, and the other one in the bedroom was my ex's because he was a messy pig. So I figured it was better that he had the bigger bathroom in the back so nobody can see his mess, and because I was tired of cleaning his bathroom like every 5 minutes, because it would take me like 3 hours to clean his bathroom. It was so gross. And it would take 5 minutes to do mine because I maintained it. So I'm like, yeah, go ahead, use mine in the hallway. So we used that. So now he was like gone. 10 minutes go by, 15 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by, and he's still in the bathroom. So I'm like, Dave, are you okay in there? And he didn't answer me. I'm like, Dave, are you okay? Did you fall in? He's like, oh, I'll be out there in a minute. I'm like, okay. I'm like, because I got to start dinner. So now 5 minutes go by, 10 minutes go by, 20 minutes go by. He's still in the bathroom. I'm like, Dave, what are you doing in there? I got to start dinner. He's like, all right, I'll be out. So now 10 more minutes go by, and he finally comes out. And I'm sitting on the couch, okay? I had a big sectional. So I'm sitting on the couch here, and my window, I had a big window seat, was in front of me. And to the right of me was a hallway. So he comes out of the bathroom, he's walking down the hall, and he's naked. He's holding his shorts, and he's buck naked. And he comes up to me, I'm like, what the hell? I thought maybe it was a practical joke, because he's kind of weird, and we always did jokes, but nothing like this. But I thought, okay, it's a practical joke. Maybe he cooked it up with my ex. And instead, he's like in front of me, and he's like pointing at me, you know, saluting, if you know what I mean. I'm like, put that thing away. Get out of here. And I cover my eyes. I'm like, put your pants on. Put your pants on. I'm not going to talk to you unless you put your pants on. And then he went, and I go, will you put your pants on? And he turns around, and his butt, it was so hairy. He had a hairy ass. He's this skinny little British guy with really pale, and he's a skinny little British guy, and he has a hairy ass. And I'm like, I've never seen that before. And then he turns, and I'm like, look, and I just covered my, like, put your pants on, put your pants on. And that's all I kept saying. I go, I'm not talking to you unless you put your damn pants on. So he puts his shorts down, on. He puts his shorts on, and he sits next to me. And I'm like moving and moving. And he's like, aren't you attracted to me? And I'm like, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I just thought, since you're not happy and I'm not happy with who we're with, maybe we could, fool around. I'm like, ugh. And I'm like, no. And I'm like, look, I think you better put the rest of your clothes on and leave. And he's like, come on. Aren't you attracted to me? I know you're attractive. I'm like, I'm not attracted to you. You are not my type. He's like, I'm attracted to you. I'm like, well, that's good for you, but I'm not attracted to you. I go, I'm friends with your wife. What are you doing? And I was at their wedding and everything. And he's like, oh, but I just thought we could, you know. And I'm like, no, because nobody has to know. I'm like, I'll know. And he's like, come on, aren't you attractive? Don't you find me attractive? And I'm like, no, you're not my type. And I'm like, please put your clothes on and go. So he gets up and he takes his clothes off again, takes his shorts off, and then he starts walking to my window and pulling my sheets. And I go, what are you doing? Now I'm getting kind of freaked out. I'm like, okay, I could probably beat him up because he's a skinny little dude. But I'm like, okay, what are you doing? I go, first of all, put those shades up. Put those shades up. And I go, and another thing, put your damn shorts back on. And he wouldn't put his shorts back on. And he kept like, come on, come on. And he's like, and I'm like, because he's been taking Viagra. And I'm telling you, taking that out. Taking that makes you kind of crazy. And I think he was getting addicted to taking Viagra. And hence why the cheating on his wife. And then he's like, oh, my wife really doesn't want anything to do with sex anymore. She's older and she's tired and she's always making excuses. And it's like she doesn't do anything, so I have to get it elsewhere. And I just thought, since you're not happy married, that you wouldn't mind. We can probably fool around together and it's more convenient. And I'm like, for who? And I'm like, no, thank you. I'm like, look, you better go. Put your clothes on. I kept saying, put your clothes on, put your clothes on, put your clothes on, put your clothes on. And he was still pointing at me because he took the Viagra. And now I'm thinking, what the hell is he doing in my bathroom? Ugh. So finally, I got pissed. And I'm like, just put your clothes on. If you don't put your clothes on, because I saw my neighbor pull up across the street. And I was like, good, because I know he has guns. And I'm going to go. And I kept saying, my husband's going to be home soon. He's going to be home any minute. And then I'm like, so you better go. He's coming home any minute. And then I saw my neighbor. I'm go, that's it. I'm going to go get my neighbor. And I open the door and I'm about to call my name. He's like, wait, okay. So he puts his clothes on and I'm like, get out, get out. And he's like, you sure you're not attracted to me? And he kept saying that. I'm like, I am. So I push him out. He gets out. And then he puts his foot in the door as I'm about to shut. He goes, are you really sure you're not attracted to me at all? You don't have any feelings for me at all? I'm like, no, the only feeling I have for you right now is disgust, so get out. And then I slammed the door and locked it. So he's like walking really slow and looking back, and then he finally left. So with that, I quickly radioed, because we had the Nextel with the radio, and I radioed my then husband, now ex. And I said, get home. Where are you? And I said, well, I have a story to tell you. And he goes, well, tell me now. I go, I don't know if I should if you're driving. So we told him the story. He's like, that son of a bitch. Because, I mean, we were all friends. He met him first. They were friends. So when he came home, I told the story in detail. And then he's like, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. And I'm like, I don't want his wife to know. She doesn't deserve this. And if I tell her, she won't believe me anyway. Anyway, it turns out, so when he left, I was grossed out. So when I hung up the phone with my husband, my ex, before he came home, I was like, I don't know what he rubbed his you-know-what on. So I threw my toothbrush out. Thank God I had an extra. I threw my soap out. I put all the towels in the laundry. I washed every single thing and wiped it and sanitized the toilet seat and everything he could have touched, the doorknobs, the door, the mirror, the handles, everything. Even the walls. And then, by then, my ex, my then husband, now ex, came home and I told him the whole story in detail. And anyway, he did bump into him, my ex, one day at a store. And he came up to him. He's like acting like he didn't do anything. He's like, hey, how you doing? Him. My ex like, don't you talk to me. Don't you ever talk to me. I knew what you did to my wife. And he went on. And then he just walked away. He didn't think I was going to tell anybody. I never told his wife. We kind of just, after that incident, stopped talking, which was good because I wasn't about to hang out with him. You know what I mean? And he was avoiding probably us. I don't know. I think they might have called once or twice, but we never picked it up. And that was it. So that was that story. The next story I'll tell next time is the story about my two crazy neighbors. It was a couple that lived above me in my old apartment. the one before I moved here up in upstate New York. And like I said, I love the apartment. It was a beautiful apartment. And unfortunately, when they moved in, they made it living hell, but then they got evicted, so it was great. But I'll tell that story next. So some of you might remember this story, and the next one I'm going to tell. But if not, but like I said, it was one of my older ones, and I wanted to re-upload it. But anyway, wonder if any of you had a similar experience. Okay, so I'm gonna go, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching. See you in my videos. Bye.